Hey everybody, welcome to the daily political tarot but astrology readings here every day on Black and Orange channel. Thank you for being here. Thank you. But thank you, Andre. Andre's here, and yeah,
Thank you for having me on. Thank you for having me on. Glad to be here.
this is like one of the best days I have is when you come on because you are on it. You've really got the knowledge. You know how to express it well. I became a patron of Andre's. Andre's doing a weekly class. Is it astrology class?
Yeah, every Sunday, Sunday for an hour, teaching astrology and almost always integrating the current topics to explain them further and to teach astrology through that as well. Yes.
Which is amazing, and the older videos are available. So I became a patron. It's don't say $12 a month.
Thank you for that. Yes, it's $12 a month. Yeah,
it's only no seriously. It's only $12 a month. You're going to learn all the way from like at the beginning. He's explaining about the different planets and then the different types of signs and just walking you through in a very clear way to understand astrology and then working it in with current topics. I'm there. So I didn't grab it, but I will put the link in the description box as soon as this is over. Okay, but and also Andre's from Astrology Alert. So do follow Andre at Astrology Alert. But you may have seen him. He's been very popular. He's got a regular gig going with Linda G now. And I just watched your video this morning where you were talking with Lena.
Well, that was fun. She's really astute. She really knows her history, her politics. It's really easy to dive deep because the facts are there, unlike what some people try to do, where they make up things and pretend things didn't happen. So yeah, she's really tuned in, no question.
Talk about one smart cookie. I mean, she's just amazing. So anyway, all right, hello everybody. Okay, so one of the things we were really talking about was I went searching for. Now, see, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure that this is accurate for Susan Hoffinger, the birth time and birthplace. I'm not 100% sure, but it's the best I could do. Because this woman is, for all her things she's done, and I don't remember her. I don't remember all the details off the top of my head. I do know she graduated summa cum laude from some prestigious school. She had a law firm with her sister, and she's gone on to do some other things as well. But she is now she's working in the DA's office, and Coward Bragg is, that's what I call him. Coward Bragg is put her in charge of the Trump investigation. So that's why we were looking for. So I went digging, and I believe I found her birthday, and it was not easy. And I gave for her birthplace, I actually just put it, the earliest information I could get on her was that she went to, like, her early schooling was in the Bronx. And all of her schooling was in New York. Her whole life has been like right there in New York. So I can't guarantee she was born there. Maybe there was a fluke and she was born, while her parents were on vacation. But that's the best information I could find. So, and sometimes that's the best you can do. I actually, if I go looking for someone's birth date, I'll be searching for their name, their date, their birth date, birthday, what have you. And then I'll quite often, if I can come up with a date, I'll try like searching through their social media and do a search find for like happy birthday to make sure it's the right day. But she's a little bit of a cipher. Anyway.
That's good. I'm glad you do that because then you correlate. And this is even more important with times because people will throw times out there and say, so and so rectified such and such. Rectifications, when you do those, they're way more complicated than people think. If you're doing it and you're being honest, you start to see contradictions and you start to see that you can just fit things in and say, well, it must be because of this, but then you see the counterpoint and you ignore it. So it's pretty tricky, and it's always good to check and have a sense of why something might be true or not. So good for you. I do notice, I just looked on the web quickly, and there is a reference to May 13th, 63 for her.
Okay, good.
So that's an example of, it does show up as her date. So,
okay, good.
exactly.
And just letting everybody know, after 50 years of life, discovered that my birth time is actually 5 minutes earlier than I thought. It's like, oh, great, thanks. So,
by the way, if you want to say something quickly about that, you mentioned that you thought it might make Saturn worse in your chart. Was that
actually what I said? If you'll excuse the expression, Andre said, that moves Saturn just underneath, closer to your ascendant, but just underneath your ascendant. And well, you know what that means. And I said, well, I assume it means that Saturn's even more of a pain in my ascendant.
Yeah.
It didn't improve my sense of humor, though. So,
That's pretty funny. I think because I know the sentiment. The Saturn actually below the line is not as difficult as above the line, but it's one of those catch-22s because if you put it above the line, it means it imprinted more because it would be prior to birth. So the line crosses through there. So you could say there's more potential in the Saturn, but as soon as you say more potential in Saturn, you can go the other way too. So it could make you more neurotic, more possibly depressive, all the parts of Saturn that are more dangerous. So it may not be a bad idea to have it where it is. It might be an advantage to put it there than to put it above. Like if you talk about Jupiter, then it's probably safer, but that Saturn just above, that's more challenging. So
well, I just assume it's so close. I mean, it's on my ascendant.
yeah,
It is, whether it's above or below. I don't think there's anybody who would say, "Oh no, I don't think she has Saturn conjunct her ascendant." Oh yes, I do. Oh yes, I do.
Remember when we said? I thought that was one of the most interesting verifications. I love this kind of stuff when the thing came up about black and orange tarot because Gemini is definitely orange and Saturn is definitely black or dark colors, and you have Gemini rising with Saturn on the ascendant, and the thing about the ascendant is it's a person's facade or a person's doorway. So but yet you would say, well, I wasn't really thinking that. It's just something that came up. You mentioned Halloween, but that's how astrology will show up in our lives in strange ways sometimes. So we're doing something and we think it's like an original thought or something, but really it's our internal star.
Oh, I agree. And also, it is dawned on me since I, done this for several years now. One of the things people would say, I was watching you back when you were, it was just looking out the window and it was just your hands. And, I've always, and it wasn't just your hands. People started saying, and your nails. It was just your cat and your nails, or the window and your nails. And it dawned on me, it's like Gemini ascendant. Gemini rules the hands, and that's the nail thing is I don't wear big dangly earrings. I don't wear big chunky jewelry. I've got a Gemini ascendant, and that's what I decorate the most.
Yeah. Well, I remember Trump's hands. I mean, he's a Gemini, same thing, right? You go straight to the core of a person's thing, and of course, he really felt that as a major insult. And it goes back with Trump. I hear it goes back to the 80s when someone said his fingers were too short. Anyways.
Oh man. Okay. So sorry. You were talking about. We were talking about Hoffinger.
Hoffinger, yeah. So
Do you want me to pull up her chart? Andre's kind enough to bring some graphics today.
yes, if you can, that probably the one that probably a good one to look at would be the one that is the green wheel, where I drew it without a time because we don't know the time, but
okay, hang on. Let me. This one, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that one exactly. That's also, I'm pretty sure that's a picture from years ago, but
yeah, she's older than that now. Yeah, that's younger.
So what you see here in this chart,
and I think when I move my mouse around, I can see things, point to things a little bit, just so you know.
Okay, so what you see is in her chart first, without getting into the meaning of what I think the key meaning here would be relating it to Trump, because you could say it's something else, but really this is a Trump thing. It's the fact that, as I understand it, the fact that Bragg drops the prosecutors or they leave, whatever, people immediately start saying, oh, Trump is cutting away again and all that kind of stuff. So in her chart, though, you can see that, first of all, this event in her life, whatever was going on before, she's really in a majorly intense situation going into the May, June period. You could even say April, because she's on her Saturn return. See that Saturn at 22 degrees, 23 degrees Aquarius.
Oh, that's a point.
And you see that the Saturn, like I drew that bunch of lines. So Saturn, Sun, Mars, that's a really tight T-square. So that's not an easy Saturn. That's a challenging, very dynamic Saturn. And that
I'm just going to throw this in here really quickly for people who are still trying to learn. One of the things, if you're looking for aspects, easy. Just look around and look for the same number or things that are close in number. So there's a 22. There's a 22. There's a 20.
There's a 20. Exactly.
Those are very, very close.
Exactly. Good point. That's exactly, in fact, really well said around the numbers, because the numbers between Saturn and Sun are really close. 20 is still considered really close. And that's why I made the red lines thicker in this direction and in the opposition from Saturn to Mars. But then I made the red lines thinner, pointing to Neptune, because it's also part of that, being in the same it's called quadruplicity, like they're square or opposed each other, right? They're the corners. So yeah, Neptune is part of it, but Neptune is 14. So it's 6 degrees. You still count it, though.
Yeah.
Just perfectly to the sun. I mean, it's still a Neptune opposition, but the big energy is in this direction, right?
Right. So this is going to be the main energy, but especially with the sun directly involved.
Yes.
So you've got a wider sphere of influence around the luminaries. Have the bigger, they can be farther away degree-wise, up to like 10 degrees in either direction, and they'll still have an effect. Obviously, the closer, the stronger. And so this 14 over here, but from 14 to 22 here, that might be a little bit weak. But with the sun here squaring both of these, there's already, I think of it like there's already like a energy shooting through there, and so you get something close that's making an aspect, and it's just going to pull it in.
Yes.
And this having a big thing like this is known as a grand cross.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And the thing is that the Saturn, you have to realize that black planet with the cross above the crescent, that planet has a 30-year cycle. So it's going through there. It's going to go through there for the second time. That's not something that happens every day. They're big, big cycles. And it's not uncommon for a person to reach something really important on their Saturn returns. And the first one for different reasons, because one is maturing after the 20s and coming to conclusions about one's purpose in life through assuming one's limitations and working with them. The second time around, same thing, but now there's more maturity, and you get the Lincoln effect. Lincoln reached this pinnacle, was getting there with the second Saturn return when he had the most impact. The problem is that then later he was assassinated. But nevertheless, it's a moment when important things tend to happen. And here you see the timing is really suspicious, really, I mean, amazing in a way, because right now Saturn, as we speak, is 19 degrees. It's moving in there within a month and a half, and it's gonna, in early June, it's gonna station around 25. So that's pretty well in the range, because then it backtracks and comes back to 19 and it goes forward again. So you'd say about Hoffinger's chart, her Saturn return is between, say, April and next February. That whole period is massive Saturn going through there.
And every time it goes through there, it's going to ring that grand cross like a bell.
Yeah, it will. It will. Although you could even say once it gets close, you're in it. I mean, even if you're not, you can then point to, yes, there's some specific stuff on that month when it was more exact, but the range is it keeps you in that gear, you know, in a really intense way. One way I do it is, as soon as you cross the degrees, I look to when it finally crosses the degrees later to say, okay, now that's done. But in between, you're in the room. That Saturn is in there confronting you and so forth. The problem is we don't know where this cross lands in the chart to get, you know, in terms of houses, because it would be, let's say, if you put it in the 12th, somehow it's more complicated. If you put it in the 8th, same thing. It would depend on where it falls. But you already know that it's a key moment in this person's life. And with Saturn, you'd say she's taking on a big responsibility. No kidding.
Yeah. Well, and having read her biography, C. Johnson says, I find Susan's birth in Manhattan. All right. I put it, I think I put it in the Bronx or something. So it's not.
That's close enough, especially without a time. You could say New York. You could even get the wrong city and you won't be that far off, because you're talking about it. It's not, it's only when you start saying exact time, then you should use the exact city just to, you know, keep things tight. But yeah.
Thank you. For anybody coming in late, we're reading on Susan Hoffinger, who has taken over the Trump Manhattan DA Trump criminal investigation, overseeing the criminal investigations against Trump, after the other two prosecutors under DA Alvin Bragg quit because he basically wouldn't go after Trump. So now this woman has been put in charge. And so what we're trying to find out is more about her, what her chart looks like, what aspects are going to affect her over the next year, and try to get a hint of her, what kind of relationships she's going to have with Trump and the other grifters. A woman took over, yes, Warrior Witch, which could be very, very good. That Andre's been talking a lot about Eris energy, and that could be good. We'll see, because she was Glenn Kirshner's he's dubious about this. I don't know. She was a white collar criminal defense attorney for years and years and years. So you'd think if she was joining the DA's office that she would be like, okay, I'm going to be on the other side now. I'm going to be, and I'd know the tricks. But we don't know exactly where. She hasn't been there that long. So she hasn't been there like all, you know, she was there working under Cy Vance. No. And Bragg is rather notorious, he's becoming notorious for not going after certainly small offenses, which could be good, but also it's looking like he just isn't wanting to go hold it. He's not willing to do anything that isn't a slam dunk. in as far as Trump goes, and that's just infuriating. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. So for anybody who came in late, sorry about that, Andre.
No problem. No. It's a you have to throw the information out there because it's quite complex. There are all these moving parts to these kinds of things, and so
one. Sorry, I just wanted just one last thing. Sorry. In reading her biography, I will say this: she's very ambitious. She has been ambitious all along. She went to prestigious schools. She got incredibly good grades. And if you look at her chart, Andre, of course, is the expert here, but if you look at her chart, I mean, it's just that big grand cross we're talking about is in fixed signs. She has a very, very fixed, stubborn energy. And with her sun in very practical Taurus, and moon somewhere in Capricorn, which is also an earth sign, but is ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very practical, stubborn, ambitious person. This is not touchy-feely. I don't know, maybe kind. No, I'm getting zero of that off of her. But please, sorry, please continue.
Oh no, that's you're saying it is exactly. It's exactly right. Practical. The thing about the Grand Cross, if you put Saturn and Mars in a Grand Cross, that's a person who takes no prisoners. This is military style, because it's someone who's going to think, I'm going to do this, and nothing will stop me. There will be, in a sense, righteousness to some extent, but it's very strong, and to have planets like that, and in this case, being older is a huge advantage, because if you do this on the first Saturn return, Saturn isn't quite as mature. Saturn needs time. It's a planet that does much better with age. It just does. So now that said, this is like saying to someone, "Oh, you're a stellar firefighter," and then you present them with a raging, crazy fire, and it's risky. So she is in a situation that is not easy for the most part, because of the tremendous political pressure there is right now, in this country, and then of course you look at a chart like this, you wonder where things fall by time, because to my mind, it's not so much that she needs to herself be a great prosecutor here, but they put her in charge of the team. And so if she's able to figure out what's happening and then is able to sell the case to Alvin Bragg and so forth, and maybe figure out a way to come up with more solid evidence that he needs to see or whatever, that might be what the achievement would be. And I mean, don't forget something else too, that I'm sure you've said this yourself at some point in the middle of this period we're going through. People have said how with Trump, and all things Trumpian, it probably will take one or two prosecutors somewhere to get the ball rolling. I think Bragg, he seems in a way he doesn't want to take chances, right? But if someone else pulls the plug or something happens, then he may feel safer. It may feel more logical or more appropriate or whatever. So there you can look at the overall Trump situation as well to kind of guess where things are going. But anyways, she's definitely on the Saturn return. That's really challenging energy for months and months going into next year. The thing is, though, and this is the big question about this chart. She's a Taurus with Venus in Aries, right? At 23 degrees Aries.
So she loves that she will love, and Venus is what and how you love. And she's going to like that big, strong, martial, it's, but on the negative side, it can be like selfish if it goes bad, because but it's forceful, God of War.
I mean, see, you could say though that Sure, it can go bad. Selfishness, over aggression, over even anger, for example. Sure, but you could also say that's helpful to her in a situation like this because it'll make her
Oh,
more
yeah.
militant.
Oh,
And
no, I didn't mean it as a negative. I'm just saying if it goes bad.
yeah, no, and I mean it's just covering the different possibilities because with any planet, it's always a range. It can operate higher or lower. We all go through this in our own charts as well. You know, this is how astrology is. People think it's a rigid. It's not. There's like a range. So, but here's the interesting thing about our Venus. Look at where it sits. It is at 23 degrees Aries. It creates a trine to Mars, and I didn't draw the sextile, but there's a sextile to Saturn. You see that how it goes up, trine to Mars, sextile to Saturn. So that's the release valve. That's where the Mars Saturn opposition finds expression or release. It's another basic
So
astrology.
this is up down. I call this a seesaw, an opposition. Up down, up down. Do you? And then
Yeah, well, I mean, it's exactly that. And oppositions, the first, most raw way to interpret them is they're difficult, they're problematic. So if you're getting heavy action to an opposition in transit, and even including, I mean, if you think about it, if Saturn is returning, it's triggering the opposition, right? It's bringing the huge conflict into play. But then at least there's a planet it can go to, which is the Venus, which is the exit point. There's a sextile from Saturn, and there's a trine to the Mars. So you exit through there. Any chart that does any opposition, if you find a trine somewhere or a sextile, the person goes to that planet to release the tension of the opposition.
oh,
And so then that's really helpful to her immediately, in terms of not being totally conflicted. I mean, if you take that Venus away, say you put that Venus for whatever reason, imagine it was right next to the sun. Now the whole thing is a grand cross and there's no exit anywhere. This could be so ambitious that you just can blow up. You'll do things that, get you in trouble because there's no sense of something harmonious that you can connect to, which is, and this is where sextiles and trines, the 1/6 of the circle, 1/3 of the circle, really helpful to offset the dynamism of a grand cross or anything that is challenging, right? So that Venus, I think, helps her a lot, right? But then you start looking at this and saying, all right, well, so she's got an exit. What's going on here? So you've got the Saturn return. It's true. Saturn return, intense stuff. Spring 22 to late winter, like not late winter, yeah, pretty much like February or early next year, sometime till the Saturn gets beyond the 22nd degree. But what about Jupiter? What do you say about Jupiter? How would you call that one?
in her chart or just in general?
Well, in her chart, and in general, Jupiter, we probably both agree is good, right?
It's a greater beneficence they call it, but it can also be a big bag of hot air, promising more than it can deliver. My father's a Sagittarius. I have a Sagittarius stellium. I know a lot about Jupiter. So
you're familiar.
Yeah, I'm familiar. Optimistic. We can do it. But it's also a blowhard.
It's in a way you're saying you're saying right. It's the expansion principle for progress or for benefit or for improvement or for anything you would call good in quotes. But the expansion principle running amok is indulgence, is blowhard, is hyperbole, think of expansion that is not harmonious. That's Jupiter. However, overall, Jupiter is much easier than Saturn.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, though, and this is where people can get really fooled. Yes, it's easier, but I think with astrology, the magic mantra, the magic word is always it depends. Depends on the situation. Because if you put Jupiter in squares and oppositions, it can become a huge problem, right? If it starts to trigger things that way, or in chart-to-chart comparisons, the last thing you need is someone's Jupiter, coming along and triggering something in your chart that you don't want triggered. Something would say, for example, in two people relating, let's say hypothetically, a person has a really difficult square, like a Saturn square or a Pluto square, and along comes another person with Jupiter sitting on that square. You might at first have a conversation that seems okay, but then be careful because you're touching the third rail, and it's basically a planet like any other planet. And if anything, Jupiter is fond of just saying things, and so it'll be
blurting things out.
Yeah, like oh, come on, why are you worried about this?
Mercury in Sagittarius, Jupiter rules Sagittarius. Mercury in Sagittarius. The number of times the words have just and then I'm just like, oh my gosh, did I just say that out loud? Oh my gosh. And that's Sagittarian Jupiter energy. It's just let it out. I when I talk about Jupiter, I usually say Jupiter can be Father Christmas or Bacchus. And that can, it's its own brand of,
in the mythology is quite remarkable that way, because Jupiter, Zeus is a party god, is a god, irresponsible, totally self-centered, self-entitled. That's a fact. And I can tell you 100% from following my astrology for years and years, Jupiter does not like working. When Jupiter's around, you just say, you know what, I'll put it up. No, I'm serious. It's very, like, I'll even do these subtle things where I'll kind of watch, I'll go, you just did it again. A really subtle thing where you realize, this discipline stuff, put it aside for now, and let's go in this other direction. Richer food, basically it's a lax energy, but it's also the energy of enjoyment, and it's an energy that, is necessary. Otherwise, life would be like the constant penal colony type stuff.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, when it's transiting, it depends where it is, and you also try to get a feel for what's it doing, when two people are relating. So first of all, her Jupiter is in Aries. Okay, and the other thing is with astrology, one of the things that is an important rule to work with as soon as you start playing with it is planetary stations. They're very important because the planet stops. Now, the planet doesn't stop. Just to clarify for people, it would be a circus solar system if planets just went, okay, I'll just take a break. They're traveling really fast in their orbits. In fact, if people realize how fast they're traveling, it's like, it boggles the mind. Like, for example, that the Earth itself is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour toward the east, right? And we don't feel it. And the planets are, even faster. But because astrology, in a way, it's the science and art of optical illusions, because you're measuring what it looks like from the Earth, from where we're standing. So the Earth will change motion, and then the planets look like they're stopped. That's how you get Mercury retrograde or whatever, all these different retrogrades. So in order for a planet to go retrograde, it kind of looks like it stops and then it goes back. And if you look in your ephemeris, you notice that for about a month, the degrees are almost identical. So it's sitting there radiating a lot more energy. And this is true in transit, when in motion, or if you're born with one. If you happen to be born with a station, that marks you because that planet is so strong. That's Trump's thing. Trump was born on a precise Jupiter station. So all the Jupiter energy that he has, now the fact that he corrupts it is a separate story, right? But Jupiter station for him. So, but what do we, sorry, go ahead. Yes.
No, there was a question in the chat. So you're about to talk about Jupiter here, but Jolie had a question. So is Susan Hoffinger, is she a rock or is she like a dog with a bone?
Both. She's a dog with a bone, and she's a rock. I mean, these are by the way, this is now we're getting into the realm of poetry because she's a rock and a dog with a bone. I'm sure she's many other things, but there we're going to the Mars Saturn dog with a bone. Don't take away the bone or she'll kill you kind of thing. It's really determined. And a rock, rock implies steady, solid, practical. What you were saying earlier, Moon in Capricorn, strategic, lots of Saturn, right? But she's on her Jupiter return this summer in July. That Jupiter is going toward parking right in those degrees. That's a huge offset to the Saturn return. Suddenly you're not saying so quickly, she's on a Saturn return, she's screwed. No. That Jupiter is very strong in the summer. 9 degrees, like July 28th, in that range, it parks. And in part, you'd say, well, it's then, but in astrology, don't make the mistake of looking too much with a microscope. Pull back and see the fullness of the transit. Like you already know that it's signaling going in that direction. It's going there. So it's part of the wave that she's experiencing. And it's very Jupiterian, right, on that account, because Jupiter happens to be returning to those degrees, right?
So do most people have, for their second Saturn return, do most people have a Jupiter return around the same time?
No, that's luck of the draw. This is where you start seeing the fated side of astrology, right? That things will often line up in ways that are mysterious and strange, because here's the kicker. Here's where it gets really weird. And you start to see, wait a second, here's the problem. That 9-degree Aries is really problematic for the Orange Menace, because that's his Access Hollywood T, right? In his house. That's extremely dangerous, right? If he knew an astrology, he'd tell him, Donald, this is a problem. Like if you were like total gangster mentality, they'd have to put a hit on her, you know.
Should we go to that other, because you had sent along?
Yes, the one with Trump, if you have it, the one where that one. Okay. So you see what's happening is her Jupiter is at 855 Aries, up there in the 9th.
Okay, so Aries is up here right now.
Correct.
In this chart.
Okay, so now I didn't put the lines, but I've talked extensively about, you see that planet at 641 Aries, that's Eris, you know, to not make it too complicated, because Eris is an Aries. And then opposite that is Neptune at 5, Libra at 51. And then you see the Mercury up there at 852 Cancer. Right? That's Trump's Access Hollywood T. And the reason I've called it that over the years is because in 2016, when the Access Hollywood bus incident happened, Mars triggered that. And that's why Mars was in Capricorn down below, triggered that formation and correlated with that scandal that happened. So, but basically it's a T-square, much like how Susan has her own T-square formed by Mars, Saturn, and the Sun, you know, which you can even see. You see how I put them on the outside. See her Mars, Saturn on the outside, and then her Sun up above there in Taurus. That's just drawing it around. I've put the planets around.
Here's Mars. Here's the Mars.
Correct.
And the Saturn.
And then the Sun up there at 2210.
The Sun at 2210 here. Right. I was trying to see if in here there's something I could draw with, but I don't. It doesn't look like I have anything I can draw with. Sorry, in this program.
Yeah, that tends to be useful, and it's one of the things that hampers me as well when I'm doing things. If I click the wrong button, then I'll get one result, but I'll get an unexpected problem as a result. So it tends to be a bummer. Doesn't let you draw. So I mean, you can. Oh, there you go. Maybe you can do something.
No, it's just editing. Sorry. Okay. I could put this into. Let me put this into Canva, because I can do all kinds of stuff in Canva, and I do. Let's go here. Create a blank. Take me just 1 second, guys. Sorry about this. Let me take me just a second. Let me grab this image. Actually, I will grab all 3 of these images. 2.
Are you trying to draw lines from the Sun to?
Oh, I'm trying to put the images in Canva so I can.
Illustrate, right?
Yeah. So get rid of that. All right, so 2, 3. Take me just a second and I'll be able to do the thing. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. All right, so I'll make this smaller. I'll make this bigger. And I will be able to put things on here, like lines and whatnot. Okay, and I'll move that out of the way. So let me change the sharing, stop screen, share screen. Sorry about the delay. Where's that? No. There. Here we go. All right, and now I have a line here, and I can make it any color I want to. Let's make it something obnoxious. That's pretty obnoxious. No, red, bright red. There we go. Okay, so you were talking about her. Her Saturn's here.
Mm-hmm.
Her Mars is here.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct. And you can. That's right, to the sun. You can see her. That's her main. Big T square. Her intense military style. I will not be stopped energy, very determined. And notice that it's cutting across Trump's ascending sign and descending sign. And that already becomes one problem immediately, because one of the things about matters of law is the pure house for law is the 9th, but the 7th shows up a lot in legal disputes and cases of people suing each other. So when a person has Saturn in that house, first of all, they're more likely to become your enemy or someone that'll rebuke you because it's in your relationship house. And especially in the context of this, I mean, there's a pretty clear signal that it's a prosecution or an attempt to prosecute. And then her son, notice that it's right up there. It's curious. That son is kind of like Melania's son, right? Trump in a way looks up to Melania. She in a way lords it over him, but being a Taurus up there in the 10th, people in our 10th sign we look up to in some way. So immediately he's going to have a certain respect for this, or a fear, right? Because her energy is positioned in a pretty compromising way. It's tying up it's connecting to his ascendant, descendant, first, 7th, and the midheaven energy, the zenith energy, the Taurus energy in his chart, right? But that's that pattern. More problematic still is that the Jupiter at 855 links to the Mercury and Neptune and Eris in his chart. It links, it sets that off, it lights it up, it turns it on. And what I've noticed with Trump is whenever a person connects to that T square of his, that Access Hollywood T, inevitably conflict erupts, even if initially they get along for a while, because in astrology, connecting to a person's challenging patterns can, at the beginning especially, it's stimulating. So it's going to be interesting and it's going to be dynamic. The problem is if the situation changes, then people turn on each other and become enemies. In this case, it's not like we have to say, well, they used to get along. No, she's just stepping into it. She's stepping into this thing, but she's turning on the energy in his chart. Now, she's turning on that energy, even though, like, in other words, this would be the case 10 years ago. She would always turn on that energy because that's her chart, right? That's how her chart connects to his chart. The problem is Jupiter also happens to be going through there at the same time, you see, in the 2022 period, because Jupiter is due to land in that spot and and be on her Jupiter return. I had said this in one of my videos that Trump's summer looks incredibly complicated because Jupiter is going through those degrees. I didn't know that Hoffinger would appear to impersonate, to literally give human appearance to the degrees, right? That's where astrology boggles the mind, because it's like you see these things and they reinforce this mysterious way in which planets and degrees come together to make something real, right? And so that's in the summer. And now you can extend further and say, okay, well, it's in the summer when it lands in those degrees, the Jupiter, but even though it backtracks going into the late part of 22, it goes to those degrees again in early 23, one more time. So you can extend the period kind of roughly like the Saturn, you take it into the spring of 23, which means you don't have to just say, well, this would mean that she takes Trump down in the summer. No, not necessarily. It could be later. It's that whole period that is descriptive of the conflict because of the position of Jupiter. Now, the thing is, if that is all that it would be, and it's plenty, right? To have this scenario alone is a problem. But notice that we know her moon. We don't know her time, but we know her moon is in Capricorn. We know the degree range because you can calculate that. It's between 11 and 23 something, right? Well, none of that is good for Trump either, because that's in the bottom part of the axis Hollywood T. And the closer it is to 11, in a way, the worse it is, because then it triggers the axis Hollywood T. But the closer it's to 23, then it opposes Saturn and Venus in the other direction. And just being there in any degree is not the place where Trump would want it. He hates it when planets go through there. Things just do not go well. I've seen this again and again. Bad news, self-destructive actions, helpers and allies that betray you because of the sixth sign. It's problematic. That's not a place you want to have the moon, really in any degree, and especially so if it happens to be in more sensitive degrees. And isn't it interesting also, look where her Venus is. Hoffinger's Venus, 23-29, is directly square Trump Saturn. That's going after someone's criminality. We're not talking here about anything other than that. Saturn in the 12th for Trump is his long-term karmic pattern of being a world-class and lifetime criminal. That's what he is. And she's pushing into that through, because her Venus is exactly square. And you can say it's square his Venus as well. It's square that conjunction in the 12th sign. So exactly, right? If you move that line over a little bit, exactly. So in other words, these two charts are linked in a way that is not good for Trump. It just isn't. I mean, if it were me and I'm looking at this, and especially if I'm looking at the timing, I'd be thinking, this is the last thing I needed. And the thing about it is, you see, this is where it gets strange again, because you could say, well, the prosecutors that were there, competent men that have a long track record and they know the rules and maybe they have great evidence. Yeah, that's true, but they're not women. And the problem is that Trump is in this siege where women in multiple places, Fannie Willis, Letitia James, that's a separate thing. That Iris in fact is right where Hoffinger's Venus is. It's right there in transit. It's just parked, slowly crawling along at 23 degrees Aries, then 24, then it backtracks, then it goes forward. It's right there. So it's Iris for a decade. It's going to be pounding on that Saturn-Venus conjunction of Trump's, which is a signal telling you it's coming for you, right? The revenge of women. What is the revenge? It's in the legal house. It's pretty obvious, right? Who's coming after him? Now we have three prosecutors, three people we know that are looking at things. By the way, there are things that he's done. This is not invented. This is just what he did. If you make phone calls asking for 11,786 votes, You're breaking the law. I mean, that's how it is. Yeah, exactly. You're transiting. Yeah, for a decade. Yeah, you have to go to 2030 before that Eris clears the area, because it just crawls. It's in this enormous orbit. Does this thing 550-year orbit, but depending on where it is in the orbit, it travels much faster to make up. And Aries is super slow. It's in Aries for more than a century, because it went in there I think in the 1930s or 20s. It's way back when, and it doesn't get, I think it's 2050 or some crazy thing before it leaves to get into Taurus. So for many people, Eris does nothing. It'll be in the background, but it happens to be in Trump's chart. It happens to be a major player, both because it creates that T-square of his. But now you see how it's traveled 17 degrees basically his whole life, but it's moved into that compromising place where it's hitting two of his planets, right? And and this is where you would have said to a person like Trump 20 years ago, hey, this planet is going to reach this spot. You should maybe rethink the karma you're making with women, because this karma might come back in a pretty fierce way.
True. I have a question. A very basic question. Donald Trump's 12th house,
Mm-hmm.
Saturn, Venus Saturn conjunction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Saturn. Because you always put the inner planet in when you're listing to the planets. You always list the closer one first. The one closest to the sun first is how I've seen it.
Yeah.
Venus Saturn conjunction. You said this is what makes him a criminal or what have you. How does it do that? What's happening there?
This is where with astrology, you have to calibrate what a person is doing. Charts as a blank slate, it's not good enough. You need to get the context. So the way you work this is you realize from experience, and it's fact, that the 12th rules monasteries and prisons. Why? Because the 12th is the 12th is the conclusion of the karma that started at 0 Aries. 0 Aries is the beginning of the zodiac, and at the end of the zodiac is Pisces, the 12th. And so you've either become an illuminated soul on the high end or a full-blown criminal. So you could be, very celestial, or very the opposite, very guttural. It'd be in that way totally corrupted, right? And by the way, I've noticed in my own looking at tons and tons of charts that you'll find saints and the most awful serial killers are in the late degrees of Pisces, precisely for that reason. It's as though you've carried the karma, and now it results in fruition on the good end or on the bad end. Well, this is just me. I'm judging Trump this way. I admit it's my judgment. Do you think that Trump operates in any way?
No, he's awful. He's the walking embodiment of all 7 deadly sins, and I cannot stand him. Exactly. I think he is a complete waste of. I think he is. There are not bad enough words for me to use to what I think of Donald Trump.
And you see him operating. Every single thing this guy does is in some way breaking some law, ignoring some norm, doing something indecent, criminal. And by the way, often with mean-spiritedness, he'll put people's lives at risk. He just doesn't care. This is 12-sign corruption. Like if you're looking for a saint, you look in the 12th. But if you're looking for a thief, you look in the 12th as well. That's the problem. And that's where you have to be careful with it in astrology with saying, well, such and such is always this way. No, it depends. It's a range. You got to find the range. So once you know that's what those planets are doing, then you're looking to planets that are putting pressure on them. And that's what's happening with this woman. And notice, to add even more fuel to the fire, her nodal axis is right where his Saturn is. That south node, north node. The nodal axis between people causes obsession between people, right? So Hoffinger is it's the nodal person that tends to no, pardon me. In this case, it's let me try to remember now. I want to get this straight. With the nodes, there's an obsession, but it is it's the nodal person that becomes obsessed with the other person. Yeah. So then this adds energy into the pattern, and it also links them karmically, right? Because that's one of the things you see when people connect to each other through nodes. There's something karmic. It pulls you strangely. In my experience, there's an obsession with the other person, or almost like an overfocus, right? So
Mhm.
that again is very suspicious to see her nodal axis. You would say it's next to his Saturn, but you can bring the Venus in too because it's 2 degrees. So it's the Saturn-Venus conjunction that is involved.
Is there something about Saturn and Venus being?
Okay, there you put it next to the south node. The north node is on this side, but on the other side. But it's
This is the south node. Is this upside down horseshoe thing? Thank you.
What were you saying? Sorry, I didn't catch.
Oh, I was just wondering what it is about the fact that in that 12th house you have, well, okay, you have Mercury. You have Trump's Mercury is right there. And Mercury is how you communicate, and it is square his Neptune.
He's a liar.
He's a liar. And it isn't a guarantee that if you have Mercury square Neptune that you're a liar. No. But if you are already leaning in that direction heavily, you're just going to completely both feet jump in.
Exactly.
Okay, but this Saturn, see, I've got Saturn on my ascendant. We were talking about that earlier. Mm-hmm. What that does, what I find it does in my life is it makes me want to present myself in an organized way. I have Saturn. I have got my Mercury, how I communicate, is conjunct Saturn and Venus, which is I think why I love to
opposed. Isn't it opposed?
Right, but I've got it opposed to that Saturn.
Yeah, Saturn opposite. Yeah.
So I've got a good aspect, I think, between my Mercury and Neptune. And so I am very clear about what's real, what's not real, fact and fiction, because the energy, it's like, yes, this is that. But it's opposite that Saturn. And let me tell you, I hate lying. Hate it. Hate doing it, hate being around it, what have you. And it's because, and it's like that it's like that Mercury is being blocked, it's like Saturn right there going, there are no lies going out the store. This ascendant, the store? No, we're not, no. Mm-hmm. And things better look nice and you better do the work. And, so when I saw his chart and it was like, okay, there's Mercury. Okay, it's square Neptune, so he's a liar. But that Mercury is conjunct Saturn, which is a limiting force saying, no, you got to do the work, you've got to be clear, you've got to but he's awful.
Well, okay, so I mean, there you get into in part, but it's a pretty big part. In your case, your Saturn opposition is pretty tight, right? It's pretty tight.
Very, very.
Mercury is 15 degrees from his Saturn. This is where the Neptune has a much bigger impact on that Mercury than the Saturn. Saturn is kind of over there, doing this other thing. They're related by sign, but 8 degrees, 9 degrees, it's quite far away. It's not enough.
Oh, okay. My mistake. Venus is conjunct his Saturn.
You are correct that they're in the same sign. I mean, that much is true. And see, this is where you see. I
made a mistake. I was thinking this because it's very small on my screen. I was thinking that was Mercury. That's Venus. Duh.
Right. I mean, the Venus.
I need to make this big.
You can then one interpretation, Saturn, Venus in the 12th, which I observe in his behavior through this, is that that's part of his narcissistic complex, because Saturn conjunct Venus in the 12th, there's a potential for being anything from some to extremely lacking in confidence about your appearance, because Venus is your sense of beauty. So then it's kind of hampered, and he spends his whole life, if you notice, painting himself orange and doing all these amazing things to somehow, I mean, who knows what goes on in the depth of his mind, but there's this thing around that. And he, you always know in a way, if a person actually reminds you that he's attractive, you immediately wonder, well, why are you even saying that? He's actually said that on national TV, and I think, who does this? Immediately you think you must have some kind of complex in your subconscious that is doing this. Saturn Venus is classic if you put it there, because think about the 12th. The 12th is a subconscious house itself, so it'll be totally out of his awareness. To him it's totally natural, but yet it reveals this type of behavior because it's Venus. So but yeah, bringing it into the Mercury Neptune, notice that it's tight. And where can Mercury go? Remember we were saying about Hoffinger, she's got that Venus to give her an exit, but where does this Mercury go in the chart?
There's no release valve.
There's no release valve. So this is a great way to get locked into a pattern of lying. Now the thing would be though, if you then say, okay, well, that's it. You get Mercury, Neptune, Eros like this, it's a liar and a crook and a misogynist, and we're done. Here's where you got to be careful. Suppose now another person was born around the same time as Trump, which is very likely to happen. People are being born constantly, and they have a chart very similar to this. You got to get the context. That person may, through their genetics, through their karma, through their whatever, develop the more wholesome side of the 12th house. And then, as an example, I've seen great meditators with Mercury square Neptune because they spend their life developing the spiritual, the high end of the 12th, and they work on that. And maybe you might find something where you'd say, oh, this guy, maybe, or this woman, they're a little bit, they get into some self-deception because that's Neptune. You might see some of that, but you wouldn't necessarily get this monster behavior that this person is demonstrating, where it's just all out, totally locked in. I mean, I think Trump cannot talk without lying. I mean, he just, it's like everything that comes out of his mouth is an invented thing or a complete lie, right? And
yes.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions before we get back to Hoffinger, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I was bringing it up was because I have always been really baffled. I don't understand how Donald J for Genius Trump can have his Venus, what and how he loves, in Cancer. Most people I've known who have Venus in Cancer, the big mom of the zodiac, they they love home, they love nurturing, they will feed you, they will obviously he's got Saturn right there limiting some of that, but he isn't drawn to women who are big mom figures. He's not, I have never understood. I've been trying to see any of that positive Venus in Cancer. So what is the because to me the negative of that would be someone who was, I don't know, withholding love, but I don't know. Could you explain how that manifests for him, what that means?
To me, that you're right about Venus in Cancer. That's a broad interpretation, and it is correct. It's just that again is where you have to take every chart and look at it independent of any broad category to make sure that something isn't changing, and so that changing the interpretation. And first of all, you're right when you said Saturn. That already makes you suspicious, because Saturn conjunct square opposition can really squelch the other planet. It's a difficult energy, and that's why Saturn has such such a bad reputation. It's hard. It's a difficult energy. And so, for example, if anyone born on Saturn, Venus, square, opposed, conjunct, the whole appearance thing, beauty, because Venus is beauty, and Saturn comes in and says, well, you're not that beautiful. And it doesn't even mean the person, it might be sort of objectively true or not objectively true. It doesn't matter. It's as soon as it's there, it creates that problem. So, but that right away will squelch the Cancer energy, the nurturing energy, the motherly energy.
Mhm.
Saturn, if you think about it, is comfortable in Capricorn because it rules it. It's not going to be comfortable in Cancer. So you've got a
big dad
misaligned. But then you also say, okay, so because he's Leo rising, Aquarius setting, the woman he's drawn to is going to be Aquarian energy with Saturn and Uranus ruling, right? So Saturn ruling Aquarius, that's not that helpful. Uranus can be icy. Uranus is a very detached, including Aquarius too. Aquarius will be accused, for example, why I say Venus and Aquarius isn't the best place for, touchy-feely, lovey, romance, marriage. Because Aquarius is more comfortable being friendly than they are being touchy-feely.
Right.
So
I always say that the good side of Aquarius is the greatest humanitarians who've ever lived. The worst side of if you want to see a bad side of Aquarius, Mark Zuckerberg, a robot.
Yeah, well, that's pretty extreme, but I think you're making a good point.
Okay.
To go to Mark Zuckerberg, but it is that it's the impersonal. Aquarius is impersonal. Mm-hmm. Now it's interesting that Melania Taurus. So Taurus is actually a sensual, touchy sign, but I believe I don't have her chart is not. I don't have it right now, but I'm pretty sure she has a lot of Uranian energy in her chart. So she is that kind of Taurus, and therefore fits his chart pattern, and so it's vibing more to the Uranus, which in his chart is pretty strong as well, and the Saturn. So this is why that Cancer thing gets squelched. But notice though that as far as the Cancer in the home and Venus drawing you to the home, he's a long-term real estate person, and his home is Mar-a-Lago. It's always been a big part of his shtick. Everything about him is home and real estate. So that is part of what the Cancer is showing, but not in the sense of being nurturing. The complete opposite, as far as I see, yeah.
Okay. And the other quick question I had was his North Node. I think I describe North Node as being like your work order in this life. Like, mm-hmm. What are you supposed to be doing? Mm-hmm. And it gives you. I'm one of those people who doesn't believe in life lesson. Like, we're here to learn. I think we're given a work order, and that, like, if you're given a job, a big plumbing job, and you go there, you've got work to do. This is what you're supposed to be doing. This is what you're supposed to be taking care of. Are you going to learn something while you're there? Well, yeah, probably, but you're there to do a job. And maybe it's because I have my son in the 6th house that I think that way, but sure. The house of Virgo, the house of daily work. But I see it that way, and so I know since my North Node is in Aquarius, I know it's the opposite of Leo. I am not here to be a queen. I am not here to be like, it's all about me. No, I'm not here to be a queen. I'm here to equalize, and I'm here to help and do humanitarian things, as well as, what other things I'm supposed to do in my chart. A lot of that is the more I focus on that, the better my life runs. With someone like this, where you've got his North Node in Gemini, so he's here to communicate. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, it's like, but his sun is right there. Mm-hmm. Is the same place. Mm-hmm. So does that mean he's here to communicate about himself? Is it in his chart that his purpose in being here is to be a horrible narcissist? Does this reinforce the idea that he's here to be a narcissist?
Well, see, the thing is, okay, so you mentioned yours, your Aquarius North Node, your nodal axis, Aquarius Leo, is across the third and ninth. So
Yeah,
you
it's on my midheaven.
you're midheaven, but it's the ninth sign,
Yeah.
third sign. So your think of the nodes as the underlying obsession that we have to create something, because the North Node is the idea of hunger, of a great ambition to connect to something. It pulls you, and the same with the South Node. That's the nodal axis. So you're doing it through information, publishing, putting energy out there, which is the third ninth. Makes perfect sense, right? And notice in his case, 511, you get into what this guy specializes in, which he's like a mobster in the sense of he incites the mob, the group, right? He's an 11th sign person who is 11th sign centered is very good at mobilizing groups because the 11th rules groups, basically, right? And then, of course, we get into all kinds of cul-de-sacs and detours because the 5th is where you do flings and romances and play, and so he's notorious for that as well. So there's a push and pull and going back and forth that way. But the main thing is 11th sign. That's Trump's genius. That, in fact, if you think about it, how he has the country hostage is because he has managed to infect a large group of people with a way of thinking, even if you say they already thought that way, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. He's the leader of this pack, right? You put the North Node there, and then next to the sun. Why do astrologers often say this can make a person mad, crazy, right? Because the sun is both your purpose and potentially your great spirit, but it's also your ego, right? And if you go to the dark side, you get a big ego, and you can, you just decide what I say is the truth, and only this is it. That's why he says things like, only I can do this. And Uranus is next to it. Again, Uranus, high-end illumination, moksha, like the Vedics say, liberation, great insight. Low end, like a rebellious teenager who is oppositional and always goes against the rules, and very self-willed and very erratic and very, very difficult energy. So you're putting the node in a very dangerous place because basically it makes him extremely hungry. This guy is relentless, and he is. That you got to give him credit for. He will not quit. He's like the evil ever-ready bunny. I mean, the batteries just do not run out. He always thinks of the next insanity, like the latest one I'm sure you heard is, if I were here, Putin wouldn't have invaded. That's pretty funny.
Wouldn't have needed to.
Well, he would have let him walk in. I guarantee.
Right. He would have just said, "Oh yeah, take it."
He would have said like what he did with the Kurds. Oh, it's not our land, and he would have found the reason. So, anyways, but just that was a long story to say, nodal axis, sun and moon. This is it's extremely dangerous because it makes him an all-in ambitious individual with tremendous focus, and it explains in part his the way he manipulates the base, and he's always attentive to hear if they don't like something, and he tries to adapt to it because he wants to keep his group, right? The 11th sign, he wants to keep it together, moving in the direction that he wants. That's how I would interpret it. I appreciate you saying he's here to, what is you think, like something like he's learning to communicate. I mean, that's true too, but I think that ship sailed. I mean, he's like,
I don't know that he's here to learn to communicate. I think his or maybe I misspoke. I think he's here to use communication for his purpose.
Oh, well, yeah, yes.
And Aquarius, I believe I'm here to use equality and humanitarianism and technology and things to do what I'm here to do.
Right, but you're forgetting that you're normal. I mean, this is like, remember that movie from long ago when Marty Feldman says, Abby
normal, young Frankenstein.
I mean, the man he's a bit of a freak. He's a he really is way out there, way extreme in his behavior. And so if you say Mercury, Saturn, I mean, you could potentially find someone with a chart like yours where, let's say, if you put Saturn on the ascendant, this can mean a person might not have enough confidence to relate to the bigger picture, and they might then do a lot of self-protecting, and then the Neptune on the other side may take over, and there's more lying and there's more deceiving and so forth. That could happen, but clearly it hasn't happened in your case. That's the context, that you could say you got lucky, you could say you were better raised. Who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
we know that this guy, his father wasn't exactly, Mr. upstanding citizen.
Yeah.
Was a KKK sympathizer, a racist. So,
Right.
in a way,
No, absolutely.
the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, they say.
Oh, yeah, the rot carried down pretty quickly. So back to Susan Hoffinger.
Sure.
Before I'm sorry if I just wildly veered off there, but I've had questions for quite a while. So Susan Hoffinger, she has this T-square, and it is not something that's going to make Trump comfortable.
No.
Now you had shown this, which I guess would be a similar.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. Yeah. You've added a line to make it. Yeah.
So there's that, and there's her chart there. Okay, so what are you thinking as far as? Because one of the things I had done was I had sent you. How could I find these quickly? Because I could pull up some other stuff, but it would be a lot easier. I could pull up AstroSeek, I guess. But how it's going to, she's going to affect him is her something that's for people who are feeling completely lost. I'm trying to pull it back down. When you are around another person, you can think of that other person as like a permanent transit.
That's a great way to put it. I never thought of that. That's good. Another person. Yes, it's exactly right. They're a permanent transit. Yes. Right.
So in the same way, when the sun comes around to where your sun is in your chart, every year we celebrate that, your sense of self, the sun, your sense of self. It's all about you. It's happy birthday. And that's why quite often the number of people I've met who married someone who have the same birthday they do.
Sure.
Or like 1 day different or 2 days different. Mm-hmm. It's because their senses of selves really support each other. So there's this energy of an internal subconscious, it's my birthday, kind of astrology energy every day they're together.
Yes.
So when I often talk about my friend Sarah, who is she's feeling a little bit better. She's still fighting long COVID, but her right here, this reminded me because her sun is also right on top of my midheaven.
Oh, interesting.
And we've been best friends for about a decade. And the main thing we talk about is business. I mean, we talk as friends. We do, funny memes and all this kind of stuff. But we're almost always talking about organizing things for business and how, our goals and how we're going to get there and what are we creating and what are we, this organization side we both really enjoy. So I saw this here, and with her sun right on Trump's ascendant, she's going to be all over his business.
Yeah.
All over everything that gives him that top of the chart status. She's just shining this constant light right down on that uh, ambitious part of him.
Correct.
That status, business, ambitious part of him. And pulling, basically, since she has that T-square, you get all of that really powerful energy. I think of T-squares sometimes it's like an overloaded power. Like, imagine those are just like power lines, and they're just like overloaded. So you get them near them, and they're like buzzing, And so she's moved that, and it's like boom, you've got that sun right. So she's around. She's a permanent sun on his midheaven if they're interacting with each other. But it's also the stress and strain and focus and buzzing energy in her chart is also going to be spilling over into his.
Correct. And yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And part of the imagery could also be because her sun is above, in the context of where she is trying to prosecute him, she holds the upper hand. She becomes a huge threat. It's like a little bit like, think of the 10th would be the ruler, the government, the power, right? So that's where that is in his chart. Now, if you met this person in a different context a few years ago at a party or whatever, no big deal. Who knows? Some thing. But this is the context, and the context is very threatening because she is the one that has the case and the evidence that she, and so forth. And so that's not good to have a T-square like this, especially looking at all the other stuff, in particular, say Jupiter, where, like I said earlier, I didn't know when I said quite a while back, hey, this summer for Trump looks complicated where Jupiter is going to park. There was no Hoffinger there at the time. She showed up later. That's what makes astrology fascinating, that suddenly a person comes in to embody the transit, that the person is experiencing. And to me, it's quite worrisome for him because, remember, independent of her, you can see in his chart that there are some really serious legal problems building up. In part, you can watch the news. I mean, they keep telling you. Look what just happened. The latest thing we heard, the January 6th committee said, we see that there was, there's a definite attempt, a conspiratorial attempt to break the law in a major way. It's part of what's happening. I mean, it's not invented. And now, the other thing I would say, too, is that I don't know if I would say this 100% because of not having her time, but a pretty good guess is that, how they start arguing about, well, who's going to do this first? Because they'll say, well, there's Fannie Willis over there, there's Letitia James over here, now there's this Hoffinger comes into the picture. I can tell you that Hoffinger's chart correlates with the summer really well, the period we're moving in. And it's not always the case that you have to wait until the summer. It could happen before that, or it could happen after that. That's where you work with the range, where you go between now and next year, Jupiter is roaming around those degrees. But she definitely embodies the conflict that Trump is caught by. And, is it that big a stretch? Why? Who's to say that, for example, the committee comes up with evidence that Alvin Bragg would have no problem with, that would almost be necessary to do it or something along those lines. By the way, I'll tell you something else. That thing about when we heard that Alvin Bragg was, there was a conflict and the prosecutors quit, and the speculation was it was because he didn't want to prosecute. That was when Jupiter was trining Trump's Mercury. It went by like quickly, went by. So I bet you he was at Mar-a-Lago thinking, that's good. They're not coming after me. The problem is Jupiter keeps going and in Pisces, and it's going to square his sun and moon with Neptune, right? Triggering that T-square. That's much harder news. And even if he gets some small reprieve of some type because it's trining the Saturn Venus at the same time, pretty soon after that, it's when it goes into Aries that is a problem, because in Aries, it locks into that T, and that's where it parks, because that's where it makes the station, right? So you can see the flow is not good at all. It's very threatening, in the context of the fact that he has this problem lurking in the background. I mean, this doesn't mean if a person then says, well, my chart has something similar with Jupiter. Does this mean I'm going to be charged? Well, no, then I would ask you, have you robbed any banks? What have you done lately? And if you haven't, you're probably okay. It will show up some other way, right?
I do have one other, if you have the time, just a little bit longer, I pulled up the, let me add this. I was trying to do this. Okay, so I've got, this is Weisselberg's chart.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Weisselberg in the center with Susan Hoffinger on the outside. And the aspects formed. And the first thing that jumps out at me is that's a whole lot of energy right there. Now, I don't have birth times for either of these people, but goodness gracious, look at all of that.
I'm trying to see if, what degree is his sun?
Weisselberg's sun is at 11.
Yeah, he's got a problem. He's got a problem because he's right in the middle. He's right in the thick of it. His sun is 21 degrees. So, and hers, it's a square, right? Well, her Mars is on his sun. He's triggering the T-square. Yeah, he's got a problem. Definitely.
Okay, let me make this bigger. Oh, no. Hang on. No, do it this way. There we go. We can compare it this way. It's easier to see. So, yeah, is it 20, 21? Wow. 22 could be in a hard aspect. So, yeah, and this is what his chart looks like in the first place. Weisselberg is a Leo. And when I say he's a Leo, he's like beating you about the head Leo. Both of his luminaries, his sun and his moon are here. We've got Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Pluto. Ascendant, midheaven, we don't know his birth time. So it's just for noon. So ignore that. But all of this is in Leo. When Leo goes bad, you get the kings who think they are the center of all.
Yeah. And okay, what do you see? Notice that he's a Leo. This is the classic Jupiter we were talking earlier, running amok. That Jupiter squares the sun, squares Venus. And one of the things that I do with a stellium like this, you've got 6 planets all part. So the moon, we don't know. But if you take, let's see, 37.
A stellium, for everybody, is a grouping of 3 or more planets in roughly the same area. Yeah. And this is like a super stellium.
A super stellium. So I read, when I look at a chart like this, I'll say Jupiter squares the sun and Venus for sure, but in a way it squares the entire stellium. So that Jupiter is compromised because it's an over expansive Jupiter. It's an arrogant Jupiter. It's a Jupiter that, for example, I'm pretty sure this guy is helping break the law. That's classic, having people like William Barr, Pompeo, Jupiter squares, right? Trump, by the way, has his own Jupiter square to that Venus Saturn as well. Jupiter and squares can do this. So then you look at Weisselberg and you say, what transit is he going through? Well, he's getting the benefit of Jupiter and Aries will trine the Leo planets, but because Jupiter comes from a square, that's not necessarily good at all. That's a problem. The best chart to look at, if you ever want to see trines that go bad, look at Bernie Madoff when he was arrested and put in jail for life and he never left. Jupiter was trining, but it came from a square at birth, and his karma had reached fruition, and a trine sank him because it brings the energy of the square. So for Weisselberg, a Jupiter trine is not necessarily that good, but a Saturn opposition, that's not good at all when you've broken the law, and that's where Saturn is. You see, Saturn is in Aquarius opposing all these planets. Not good. And then when you, I hadn't looked at this, but good for you. You pulled it out. She's right on his sun. I mean, the Mars is there, and then Saturn on the other end, and what's in it? So Mars, Saturn, and the Sun, right? The T square straight to
Right. And you're talking about Susan Hoffinger?
Hoffinger, yeah. So
Let me make this smaller.
Would be a threat to him as well. Yeah, exactly. Which makes sense because the case being built has to go through Weisselberg because he's the one that was moving the levers. And some people say things like, "Well, now Trump is going to say I didn't know anything." They always say that, right? They always,
right.
But I don't know. It's
but the thing is, but the thing is that they say Weisselberg isn't flipping, and that he still thinks Trump's going to pull something out of a hat.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this chart and I'm saying that much Leo energy, and what you're saying with the square to overconfident Jupiter, it's like, of course he's not going to flip.
Yeah,
but he may eventually. But like at first, he is going to. I think it would get down to the point where I don't know. They'd have to really be threatening him with something, and he'd have to really be facing some kind of actual consequences. So I didn't think he would flip easily. You don't do this for decades and have this kind of chart and be someone who's like, oh, okay, what can I do to help you to turn against the family I've worked for my entire adult life?
Yeah, well, I mean, all I can say is flip or not flip. His chart is compromised, particularly in the context of what has been charged, and we know what's in play there, and the timing isn't great. And Hoffinger, who is the person in charge, is set up to go after him in some ways even more intensely than Trump, because in the case of the T square in Trump's chart, it's lined up with the ascendant, descendant, the midheaven is it's good, it's tight, but this is to the sun, straight to the sun. Mars is on there, and so it fully locks into Weisselberg's, solar energy. Not good.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, and I know this is a smaller thing, but I did find it interesting. Now, everybody can ignore this ascendant thing because we don't know where the ascendant is. Okay. Yeah. But right here, I found it interesting that Weisselberg's Chiron, so the wound that will not heal, is in the same place as her Lilith, which is the woman who will not bow. And I know these are small things, but I just found that very interesting because usually when something hits your Chiron, close this door. Normally, when something hits your Chiron, it'll get you. I mean, because it's this weakness, this part of you. And I will point out, I just found out Ted Cruz has this kind of T square in his chart with his sun, I think it is. And part of the T square is a Chiron. So his sense of self, that kind of whinging weakness, sense about him, it's like, oh, that I can see that. No, it's right there. But anyway, so Weisselberg's weakness and having her untamable Lilith in the same place, I know they're minor things, but I just found it jumped out at me when I saw it.
I think it adds to it. It adds to it.
Small, as you say, a condiment, just a little sprinkling, sprinkling of pepper.
And by the way, the interesting thing with Chiron is that Chiron can have meanings like that add. It's almost like you're adding the condiment. You add this other thing that adds some more relevance, but then you look at surrounding transits and you also see where it is at, and notice that it's transiting at 10 degrees Aries. That's where the action is. Isn't that interesting? Because you brought it up as by being in her chart in Scorpio, but in the transit right now, Chiron is where that Jupiter is going to go. It's in that 10 degree Aries. it's square. It's doing the very thing that we're saying Jupiter's going to do in the summer. Now it's going to go beyond that, those degrees. But again, it's in Trump's legal house, right? It's roaming around in there. It's yet another player in the problem, right? You don't want any planet in places like that when you have pressures like this. So it's a player as well. It just adds even more evidence that something is falling apart in that way.
Just one last thing I wanted to point out about this chart. It's called a synastry chart when you put two charts together like this, SYNESTRY, and this big lump of planets in Weisselberg's chart here, it's sitting basically on her Grand Cross. So, and it has been said, because I have a big T square actually in my chart, that over the years and the decades, you get kind of used to the energy. You start being able to utilize it better. You get, and you don't know any. It's like, that's all I've ever known, so I've learned to use it to, hopefully to good use. So with him setting off this big, think of those overloaded power lines, like I think of it. He's, everything about him is caught right up in that. Yes. And she's used to the energy by now. You were talking about earlier, if it was her first Saturn return, if she was, 20 years old, it would be one thing. But now she's in her 50s, and it's like, I know myself, I know this energy, and this huge power buzzing thing. This is me. This is my life. Deal with it. And now you are going to be a focus of this. You are going to be a part of this. And it's like, whoa.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, you could even say just on the sun alone, but then it's on Venus, and then you notice all the other Leo stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Again, not the kind of person you want in your life with what he's dealing with, because he's dealing with a major pickle. There's a lot of social pressure. I mean, people say, Trump gets away with everything. There's a big part of this country that isn't saying that. They're saying he needs to be accountable. In fact, the majority thinks that way. So that's a lot of pressure. You don't just snap your fingers. These prosecutors feel the pressure, I think, personally, but globally as well. Because in a way, for her, if she's successful, it'll be a huge, what is the expression? Feather in your cap, or how does that go?
Oh, the biggest feather you can get.
Exactly. So you can build your life from there forevermore through something like that. But there's also, there's something called justice and decency. And I mean, these people are crooks. They're total crooks. They're basically, I'm amazed actually that they've been able to do this for as long as they have. Maybe that's a testament to Trump's criminal skill, because he doesn't leave a lot of traces, and he makes it hard, to prosecute him properly. But there are too many things, in a way, because he's done too many things all at once too. This is like the backside of, we used to hear, you can't do anything with this guy because today it's one scandal and tomorrow's scandal blunts the previous day's scandal. Well, that's true. But now we have 3 different places where he's being prosecuted for real crimes. I mean, it's too much. It's too complicated. Too bad for him, let's say.
Well, sorry, I was just going to say, I've got the synastry charts up here with the griftlings, the Trump children, Sniffy Jr. and Princess Grift. And yeah, although I'm trying to think, there's a lot of positive stuff though too. In like, she might not despise Junior as much as some of the others, but yeah, I really did not see her. Let's put it this way: with Ivanka, although we don't have a birth time for, we do have for Junior, which is weird, but we don't have a birth time for Ivanka, at least that I know of.
That's right. There isn't one around. Yeah.
But she's on the inner chart here. All right. And I've always loved this. Her Venus, so in cisgender type men and women. You've got Venus's femininity, Mars's masculinity. Her Venus, her femininity, is in the exact same place as her Neptune, the fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Celebrity fantasy. Yeah.
Elaborate fantasy, and it's also in Sagittarius. So you get the world traveler, the beautiful, jet setting kind of figure. And I just, even though there is a positive aspect to Susan Hoffinger's Venus down here, and there's a positive aspect to Susan Hoffinger's Mars up here. Just looking at the chart in general, in looking at Susan Hoffinger's chart and the kind of person she seems to be, and looking at this kind of breathy fake voice thing that Ivanka does, I imagine would get on her nerves in a big way. Even though those are positive aspects, I just see this person with Taurus, like heavy duty Taurus, Aquarius, Leo, Mars and Capricorn, just this fantasy thing just not working for her. But there are still good aspects between them. So
well, you'd have to know we don't know Ivanka's time, you're right. So we don't know where her Sun and her Uranus are. The Hoffinger's T-square hits approximately in the middle of that. If you take a Sun-Uranus coalescing energy, you get 18 degrees, and then that links to their charts. But Ivanka's problem, as I see it, is that Neptune is squaring her Venus in transit right now. And that's not a great transit, again, depending on where it falls in the chart. But you always, with Sagittarius, just by the logic of it's the natural ninth. So if Sagittarius is getting stressed, legalities can come into the picture, irrespective of where it is in the chart. It's an automatic thing. Just like with Leo, you might get a child issue, or with, whatever sign you pick, that broad category always kicks in. And at the moment, she's dealing with a Neptune square this year and next year, because it'll still be hitting that Venus all through next year. So there's a bit of an unknown around what that might mean. But for her, I'm sure she's not settled at all. She's probably quite up in the air. And Neptune, when it's transiting it can really destabilize things around groundedness, because Neptune is almost the opposite of being grounded, and so a square exacerbates that. Really increases it. In the context of the fact that she's in the middle of it, because she's part of that organization, and yeah. So then, depending on where the Sun Uranus fall.
Well, so I'm just wondering, just looking at this information right here with Ivanka or Junior, if you put them in a room together, what would your first impressions be? What do you think? How do you think that would she be like, okay, we're just going to get along, or is she going to continue? Is there anything that's going to weaken her bulldog nature, as I would call it?
Toward Ivanka or toward who?
Or Junior, either one of these.
Well, Junior's chart is known, and see there, for example, it would depend a lot on if we knew Hoffinger's moon, because if we knew her moon, it might be really tightly wired to Junior's chart. He's got 19 Capricorn on the descendant, so that would be one possibility. But I don't get the same linkage through Junior or Ivanka to her that I do with Trump. You know,
Mhm.
Trump is it's a lot more direct, but you do see in Junior, he's dealing with problems as well, and they're legal problems, and they're obvious because the Neptune transit is in the ninth, which is legalities, and he's got a problem Neptune at birth because it's in the middle of a square and it's opposing the moon, so which is ruler of the ascendant. There's plenty there for him to be pretty worried, you know, during the current situation. And even if you look at Junior with his 10-degree Aries or Capricorn Sun, well, Jupiter's going to square that when it parks in the summer, so that's not good either. You know, it's not a particularly helpful alignment.
Is it parking in Aries?
Yeah, 9 degrees basically, and the sun is at 10. It's in there. It's going to square, right? So this tells you that through Junior, you can kind of see that the summer it lines up with Trump's pressure in the summer as well.
Well, in the summer, then it's also going to be hitting. We probably covered this, and I've just blanked on it. But then, if that's where if that's where Jupiter's going to park this summer, then that's going to be good for her.
For Ivanka?
For Hoffinger.
Oh, for Hoffinger, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, okay. I mean, in a certain way, we always got to wait to see how things develop. I'm sensing that just because Trump's situation is so complicated, I'm guessing that it's going to tilt more to her Jupiter than the problem that might happen being on such a intense Saturn return, where sometimes with Saturn it'll block you and not let you progress and so on. I'm choosing to interpret it as a very dicey, difficult situation, which it is, but with a Jupiter tilt because it's returning, it's in a really good spot. So to me, her odds are good, and it lines up poorly with the Trump family, especially Trump himself. You know, Ivanka of the group, probably the least, I think. Let me see if I can.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, as far as of the ones here.
Well, yeah, except that, see, with Ivanka, where she gets dragged in pretty hard, is that I believe there's let me get my ephemeris. There's a Neptune station. There's a Neptune station right around that time in June.
Ooh, that would not be nice for her.
No. Okay, so Neptune station's at 25. Now 25 looks like it's past. She's getting, it's really killing that Venus. So Ivanka's problem is the Neptune, and that ruins her summer as well. You know, pretty much guaranteed, because again, it's the context. A Neptune square need not be thinking that the party might be over, you know, that they might take down your organization and things like that. But in the midst of this, I would consider that a big problem. And you don't always say, you know, okay, summer, there are different dates. It's a broad range. End of June, Neptune stations. End of July, Jupiter stations. You see that all these planets are coming together to do this, and not in a good way for the Trump people, because they're hitting spots that are dangerous. You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I hope no one thinks I've been rude by doing graphics works while Andre is talking. I do graphics work all the time. I create more than 120. I need to create a minimum of more than 120 images a month just to run my live streams and all the other stuff that I do. So I can sit here and do graphic stuff, and I'm totally I'm totally listening. But I did want to point out here that we don't know Ivanka's birth time, so we have to kind of ignore that because we don't know where her ascendant is. But over here, we do know Sniffy Jr.'s birth time. So where his ascendant is accurate. And I find it interesting. We were talking about the North Node being your work order, what you're here to do in life, go in this direction. And it's in roughly the same place as Junior's ascendant, how he's viewed. And I'm not saying, because, you know, there's also, I've heard discussion about, since they're both mathematical points, they don't necessarily act out so much, but I just found it interesting, an interesting coincidence.
Okay. Great point. No, that's a great point. Okay, that's a fabulous, because at first I thought his node. No, you're talking about Hoffinger's node on his chart, right?
Right. Her north node is
Okay.
on his ascendant. So
Right.
how he's viewed in the world, her work order is
Yes.
is working on how he's viewed in the world.
Correct. So that's actually, that's a great call. That would tell you that he becomes, on that alone, more of a target for her, Junior, right? In some way, or paying attention to it, because the ascendant is almost like who you are, your body, your appearance on the planet. It's a very visceral energy, and the fact that someone's nodes connect to it, yes, immediate pull. In fact, you see this a lot in one-on-one relationships. People that get pulled together, ascendant nodal connections are really powerful. There's this thing, where you get pulled, and sometimes you can't understand why. Or another rule that is used is the ruler of the ascendant. If the ruler of the ascendant connects to the person's node, then they fascinate the person. In Vedic, they tell you, they seize you. They just, and then you can't help yourself. So in this case, yeah, he will be for sure. She'd be looking and thinking, this little criminal.
Yeah. It's a shame I don't have any. I don't have the numbers on here, because it also makes me wonder if there's anything. Well, square. Okay, so if this is okay, so there's that. But I have a question for you. If people were friends, this having your north nodes in roughly the same spot would be a good thing. Your kind of your work orders are both sort of headed in the same direction. But in this case, does this just mean like their fates are more closely aligned, or do you know?
We're talking about who now? Hoffinger and who?
We're talking about Ivanka and Hoffinger right here. So as opposed to Hoffinger's north node being on Junior's ascendant, Ivanka's north node is somewhere around here.
Oh, I see that they're in the same axis. Yeah.
Does it make a difference?
Well, they're in a way they're. Let's see. So it's 24 degrees and 26 degrees, but they're flipped over though. Her Hoffinger's south node and Ivanka's north node, right? So the same axis but reversed.
Really?
I don't know that I make as much out of that, because the way Ivanka works her nodes, they'll be wherever they fall in her chart and her interests and her inclinations. But you could say, it does work to say that having the same nodes as somebody, either the exact same or flipped, does create a karmic pattern for sure. And in the sense that these people come to know one another for good reasons or bad reasons. Yes, that's true. And then you can add to that with Ivanka, notice that she has a Pluto Jupiter conjunction square the nodes, right? So that might not be the greatest thing. In other words, nodal things trigger that square for her. And whenever you see Jupiter, Jupiter, the natural ruler of Sagittarius, it can be a legal thing. It can be a law and order thing. And so that's one way to explain it. Probably not in a good way. My guess is, to me, the three children, unless you're going to say that because they have the same nodal axis, are you suggesting that Ivanka might be the one that flips or gets friendly with Susan?
No, it was just a matter of. I just find that in general, nodal access, things with nodal access can really like get past your defenses,
Yeah.
and at least shake you a little further down than you want to admit, because now making a couple of assumptions here, because we don't know either of these people's time of birth. All right, but in theory, if both of them happen to be born around noon, if
Right.
both of these, at least what I'm looking at here, both north nodes are here in Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so the south node is going to be over here in Capricorn. And while your north node is like your work order in this life, your south node is what's comfortable, but it's also what you need to be moving away from. Well, if Hoffinger was born at noon, 1 o'clock, something around that, her moon would be on Ivanka's south node, which I've heard that if you have people who you're dealing with a lot, people who are close to you or whatever, if they have something major on your south node, it can like pull you down, like pull you back. You can't, it's harder to progress. The more, like I said, my north node being in Aquarius, the more I act toward Aquarian ways, the universe is kind of at my, wind at my back. The more I act like Leo ways, like I am all that, the universe is like, no, then it's like a headwind. So because the luminary, the moon, big, would that be pulling Ivanka back? So she couldn't do the same kind of dance and things to progress that she normally does. Would that be a weakness?
So it's Ivanka's
south node and Hoffinger's moon?
The thing about, if you're looking for precision,
no.
Well, no, because think about it. That in Hoffinger, if she's born right at the very end of the day,
right,
super end, it would be 23:43. The moon. So then that would mean that to connect to Ivanka, because Ivanka, you're talking about 26:28, right? So probably the best you can say is that Hoffinger's moon is on Ivanka's south node. You can see that. And I wouldn't call it, I don't know that I would call it good or bad, but if I had to pick, I'd say not so good. Yeah, I would agree with you. Just the fact that they're in the same sign wouldn't be are you interpreting it as it would cause Ivanka to fall into her old patterns, or how do you phrase that?
Well, I think of the north node and south node as doing what the universe wants you to do, and so the universal wind is at your back to help you forward. But if you're just acting in the old south node ways, or you're pulled back toward that energy, that you've got this headwind, so you can't. Everything's harder. Things aren't, and since people are like permanent transits, I was just wondering if Hoffinger's moon, just emphasizing that that south node, would make it hard for. So the wind would not be the luck, the wind, the universal wind, the
yeah,
it would just be harder.
I think
harder slog.
Yeah, because you could picture, for example, the fact that they're interacting in the sense that Hoffinger is looking for legal exposure. Ivanka doesn't want her to find any legal exposure, but Ivanka's south node would cause her to hang on to what she's already done. In other words, to go to her safe place. The south node is what we already know, our behavior as it's, in a sense, stuck, or in other words, you're not progressing. But there you see that the imagery has to do with all of her past, what she's done with this organization, which is precisely what Hoffinger is trying to expose, which is what Ivanka doesn't want her to expose. She doesn't want Hoffinger to come in and say, hey, you guys were keeping 2 books and you were cheating and you were part of this, and which part did you know about? All of that is Ivanka's, you could call it her past karma, which is her south node, right? And that's not what she wants to deal with. So yes, I would throw that in as a potential problem in the way, but this would be the way Ivanka would react, which would almost be in against her own best interests. But that's pretty normal too, in a way, because family, look what it is. Cancer Capricorn is the familial, that you immediately think of the home and career, the family axis in a way. And this is what this whole thing is. It's a family business that obviously is totally corrupt, and they're trying to expose it. So, and my feeling is because Ivanka is dealing with that Neptune transit going into the summer, and these transits, what I notice is you don't have to wait till it's exact. It's like a wind that blows in and already starts to affect you. And it's not good for clear thinking. It's the kind of thing where you get confused, you don't know where to go, often because there are too many options, too many problems. If I go this way, I cause that problem. If I go the other way, I cause the other problem. So then you become paralyzed, and there's more of a chance that you'll make mistakes. And this is, I think, what is causing Putin a lot of problems, because the Neptune is really misaligned in his chart through those quincunxes, and
True. I have one last question for you, if that's okay.
Oh, of course.
With Trump, ick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about it. Ick or ard or ugh.
Yeah. He has all of everything we've been talking. Let me get rid of these at least, so at least we're looking a little more clearly at what is in his chart, like his Hollywood Access Square. Okay, so this is just about Trump here, because Eris is transiting, and oh no, get rid of that too. Okay, so this is Trump. I understand that. I understand that Neptune is in late Pisces here, and is headed toward, at some point here, setting off Trump's Access Hollywood T Square.
Right here, Neptune,
which is ugly. Yeah. So Neptune's going to get there, and who was it who was just saying in the chat that they're looking for? Oh, it was Betty Harper was saying, I'm meditating and prepping for April 12th, which will be the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. So that's still in late Pisces.
Well, yeah, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is 23, almost 24.
Okay.
Let me see. So Neptune, Jupiter, 24, basically. 24. Now, the thing about that is that is well within range of his sun and moon. That's what it's most triggering. Someone could make an argument and say, yeah, but it also trines his Saturn and his Venus from there, right? The problem with that argument is that Neptune is a really problematic planet in his chart. It has no exits. It's in the middle of that T. And Jupiter has some advantages, but it has some disadvantages too, because it squares the Saturn Venus. So my sense is that's going to tilt negative when it goes to the eighth sign is complicated. If the eighth house, the eighth sign is complicated, that's a complicated square. And then in the summer, the Jupiter separates and goes into Aries, further cementing the problem. Neptune getting into Aries, that's going to take years, because Neptune is very slow. So Neptune is going to hang around the end of Pisces for quite a while before it does that. But you could make an argument that, given Trump's penchant for fighting everything to the last minute, he will not accept anything without appealing it all the way to the Supreme Court. And our system is set up so you can delay, you can keep appealing, for good reason. That's how a democracy works. Trump knows this very well. He's always trying to buy time, delay. If he can break you financially, he'll do it, but it's hard to break the government because they have more resources than you. So you could say that, assuming, by the way, because we keep going over the sort of the big elephant in the room, or the hidden elephant in the room, which is that we're talking about the eighth sign, which can kill you. This is a dangerous thing. Eighth sign situations can be terminal. So there's that. But if the man continues to move along for a number of years, then he's looking forward to Neptune when it gets into Aries, triggering that T again and bringing in all kinds of problems, likely to be legal because it's the ninth and so forth. So there's that as well. But in the near term, he has to deal with the Jupiter Neptune through the eighth squaring the sun and moon, right? So that's how I interpret it, and I consider it pretty threatening.
That is so, and that would be a lot of energy all at once.
Yes, a lot of energy all at once. Exactly. Yeah.
So this, we'll put this back here. Let me just change this color. So we'll change it to I don't know. I'm having trouble picking a color. This is ridiculous.
Choices, right? The infinite palette. You're playing with the infinite palette.
I'm going to use pink because that would annoy him. Okay, so this sort of there. And I'll make this pink too, so we know what we're talking about. There, I made it girly pink just for Trump. So this is what's happening here. So it's just slightly after, but it's well within the orb, well within the sphere of influence. So April could be bad.
Well, I mean, see, realize again, this is the thing about what I said earlier
But I want him to be okay. I want to make that clear. We both want him to be okay because Andre and I are in total agreement about more than two things in this life, but definitely two things in this life. One, Donald Trump is vile human being. I think we are totally in agreement on that.
Yes.
And two, we want to see him we want justice. We want him in a courtroom. We want him in jail.
We want him in orange, right? What he tries to.
We want him in orange, in the jumpsuit, whatever the local thing is. We don't want him ill. We don't want him to pass away. We want justice. So it's like, no, we don't want anything bad to happen to him. We want justice, courtroom evidence. So this worries me a little bit from what you're saying. What I'm thinking, though, is you were talking about Susan Hoffinger's Jupiter return happening this summer, which would be right around here, which we were saying would set off this T-square.
Yes.
So, and that's never good for Trump.
No.
That Access Hollywood T-square is just bad in his chart. If he was a nice person, it wouldn't be so bad. But
right. It's always the context of what you're doing. For example, if you look at his natal Jupiter, it trines the sun, which makes it a really strong, helpful planet, sextiles the moon. That's great, but it squares Saturn and Venus. So it's squaring planets in the 12th, which it's pretty obvious, expanding into criminality. That's what he's done his entire life. That planet, when it transits, will then bring that square into play, which means even though it's trining the Saturn Venus, it's bringing the natal square into play. Now, a counterpoint that you could bring in that would be helpful to him is that because it trines the sun and it's the 11th sign and that's the house of groups, that's where his base will continue to support him and say, oh, this is politically motivated, blah, blah, blah. Sure, but which is going to win out here? My feeling is the compromised part of the Jupiter, because it's a mixed thing, pointing to that 12th at birth, transiting in the 8th, together with Neptune, which is badly compromised. That's two big dogs just, hitting that sun and moon. And I have to interpret that as negative, especially when I see the Jupiter then moving forward and stopping at the Access Hollywood T to, cement the situation, which to me is not good, because that's fully in the legal house. triggering that T-square for which there's no exit, etc. You know, by the way, all the while, keep in mind that's we're talking here about that as being critical moving into April, May, but keep in mind he's still in the midst of Pluto opposite Venus. That's not over through this whole year. It's constantly in late Capricorn, pushing into that Venus. And that's another thing that is not good because Pluto loves to destroy things, to recreate them. And in a person's life, short of killing you, which it could, I suppose, at some point in your life, it's the most useful planet toward transforming from one state to another, from one place in life to another. So it's great. But again, the context with this guy is that the question is about what he's done, which is fully criminal. And so the Pluto hitting on Venus, I interpret that as Venus rules his 10th, which is his career. It's trying to destroy his career and his reputation. It's trying to completely upend it. Right? You know, this has to match, by the way, a lot of these things, you have to match it. If you say, well, how do you know which way it goes? It's like when charts that I've seen where a person is a murderer and Saturn comes in and they get arrested and then they never get out of prison. You know, there are such things like that. And so they're either, you know, there are no two ways. It's not 50-50 anymore. It comes in and calls them on their karma. Well, why does it do that? Because they can present evidence that proves it. This is one of the things that drives you nuts about the Trump era, because him and now millions of people say, well, there's evidence of something. Where is the evidence? Why don't you show us the evidence? They never show you the evidence. They just say, right, it's obvious that there's evidence. What do you mean it's obvious? Show it to me.
Right.
Right. And
in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
A very short period of time.
Right. This is called the gaslighting evidence, right? Uh-huh. Gaslighting evidence. And why is it such a problem? This is people that they get so upset because they say people like Trump get away with everything, because it's very difficult to prove with, you know, when you put it before a jury, you just need one person to say, I don't like this, you know, and they rule in his favor, which would be a disaster politically, legally, etc. So that's why legalities take a long time. You saw the woman, you know, the blood lady, Theranos. She was first in trouble in 2015, and she was only recently, years and years later, because she kept paying lawyers, and the lawyers kept delaying and delaying. It takes a long time. So this is the same thing. People like Hoffinger, you know, Fannie Willis, Letitia James, you got to really tie it down before you go after someone like this. Because one thing about Trump is he's quite an expert criminal. He's able to dodge and weave and delay and use the public megaphone to confuse and to you know, well, basically cry witch hunt. Which, I mean, the reason it's a witch hunt is because he's a witch.
No offense to witches. When Jupiter is going to hit Trump's Access Hollywood T-square, when is that? Because I'm trying to get to two key dates to watch when something might happen, or around when something might happen. So we've got that April 12th.
April 12th is Jupiter Neptune conjoining. Jupiter stations in July 28th, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen right on July 28th. It means that's when it's really thick. You know, the energy is really
and what degree is that going to be at?
843.
So right there.
Yeah,
okay.
Right there. And on Hoffinger's return, right there. 855. I mean, precise.
8 degree. 5 minutes. We'll move Earth's transiting for decade up there. 8 degree, 55 minutes. In. So, all right. So roundabout. So these are at least 2 dates we could keep our eyes open for.
Yes, although I always prefer to say to people, the whole summer can be quite entertaining because there are multiple places where you get hits. I mean, for example, then you get the little planets like for instance, Venus in July, ahead of that July 28th date, it triggers the Access Hollywood T around the 23rd, and it goes through there. Then you get Mars in Taurus. It's moving. It squares Trump's Pluto. Then it squares his Mars. Then it squares his ascendant. It's up there in the same sign as Hoffinger's Sun, right? So that's added pressure from little planets. And
so hang on. So you're saying Venus on what date?
well, kind of a little bit ahead of the Jupiter station.
23rd, I think you said.
20. It moves into Cancer on the 18th, and it locks into the Access Hollywood T around the 22nd.
22nd. Okay.
And then, 22nd to about the 26th, 27th, which is right in the same range as the station on the 28th. And it is Venus, and it is a lord of that 12th sign, or sorry, a tenant of that 12. So it's a Venus return, which, by the way, can be then another story that you can build around the return of Venus and the fact that it's surrounded by so much trouble around it that it can mean the return of Venus spells a year, of a really bad year on that account, right? Because everything around it is so complicated.
And you were also saying about Mars?
Well, Mars will be in Taurus around that time, and Taurus in his chart is fairly okay, except for the fact that his Pluto and his Mars rising, Mars especially, Mars rules the ninth, which is legalities, and Mars will the transiting Mars will square his natal Mars in the middle of August. Right? So that begins to show you that it's a broader period. I mean, you don't just point to the end of July. You can see that the surrounding period ahead and past that is very contentious. From planets that are in play. Jupiter will still be in play in August because the station means it's parked in the same degrees for some time. Mars is roaming around, hitting his Mars. It's telling you that July and August are complicated. Complicated. That's a good word to describe it.
Okay, but these are good. At least we have some general sense of when. And I always describe the energy of astrology is like we're in these super deep sea little single person vessels, and we're way down, and we've got this umbilical cord to the surface, which is where our guides are and what have you. And we're down here. And so if like you need help or somebody is thirsty, can you have divine intervention? It'd be a lot easier to just send me a message that says, oh, here, move that there, but we are in this energy. And what astrology is to me is, and we are literally in a sea of energy. And it's what that energy is going to be like. Is it going to be calm, gentle, a good day to go out, move around, do the thing? Is it going to be the most awful, like, current coming through, so you better like hunker down or you're going to get smacked up against some rocks, that kind of thing? So it isn't that it's guaranteed if this happens, then that's going to happen. But if there is a big storm coming and you've been alienating people by lying to their faces, and you've been stealing money, and people can't trust you, and the police or people are investigating you, and all of this, when that storm hits, when the currents are bad, when who's going to want you hooked up to the rock next to them? Who's going to help you if you get sucked out into the current?
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly it. You're describing it perfectly. And you could also say, I often say to people, with astrology, it's a little bit like horseshoes and grenades, in that the adage says that it's kind of implying that it's not an accurate thing, but because it's a grenade, if you're near the grenade, you're going to be in trouble because it'll kill you. So you don't always say find me the exact day. There's a range, there's a period, you could call it a room or an environment. And if the grenade is in there, then you look and you see, oh, look, Jupiter is precisely on the 28th. And then you notice that it happens 10 days before, 10 days after. Yes, you'll find something, probably a lunar thing or whatever, some trigger. But the reason is because the environment is so hostile. Why is the environment hostile? Because of what you did. This is why it's with astrology, it can be brilliant where you say, well, look where the Jupiter and Neptune are. They're in his house of taxation and insurance and all the topics that he's being pursued for. It's not an invented thing. That's what the house rules, the eighth, right? So, I mean, the fact that it also rules death and rules other things, that's true too. But it does correlate with his actions in the past, and which is why now the law is pursuing him. Otherwise, they wouldn't. It's like that, you know, and it makes perfect sense. But it doesn't have to be that you can point to a precise date. Sometimes it'll do that. I've had that happen in my life where I'll be amazed by the unbelievable precision of something, where something happens and the moon goes by, triggers it, the degrees match, and I'll think, wow, this is amazing. Other times it's like, oh yeah, I remember February because, you know, the situation was complicated and then it just happened on some Friday or whatever, and it wasn't as precise. But you already know that there's a potential for it to break out that way, right?
Yeah. Oh no, I got rid of the wrong one with this to the back. I just want to finish by pointing one thing out. This is a graphic I made a while back, which I call it. This is like the basic chart. Like, this is what you memorize, and then everything's a variation on a theme, just about, in astrology. I don't know why it's not. Let me just make it clear. Yeah, not really, but sure, we'll go with this. So, what you were saying is true, but the U.S. just had their Pisces return. Not Pisces return. What am I saying? Pluto return. Thank you, brain.
That's another one that's the thing about a range. The Pluto, if you look too closely at the exact degree, you then might say something like, well, the U.S. Pluto return is the Ukraine war, or, you know, some kind of thing to pin it to the really close degree. But the return it's been in play for a while, because returns start a degree or two before the actual degree, and then they beyond the degree. So I interpret Pluto as the tremendous turbulence we're going through, where the country is, in a sense, being forced to change in a big way because of all these forces that have been unleashed, you know, in the last couple of years, and will likely continue to deal with this going forward. It's not just one thing, but it could turn out that the Ukraine war is a significant part of that as well. That's a separate topic. We can talk another 2 hours on that, because it's starting to occur to me that the Ukraine war is a horrible event, and yet it might be actually the fact that this horrible thing is happening might turn out to be a positive thing for the restoration or the protection of democracy. You see,
that's what I was about to say, actually.
Yeah. And so it's horrible, but that's an example of where it could become part of the U.S. Pluto return in a more positive sense that way.
Right, because the one thing I was going to point out is this is the basic. This is like the basic chart. The Aries, the zodiac begins in Aries here, and it goes all the way around. And some people will say Aries is the first sign, Pisces is the last. That's why, and what have you. In the U.S. chart, the Sibley chart, which I think most astrologers use, Pluto is in the second house, and that is the house of values and valuables. So, and it's our money. And this house is the house of Taurus, which is a very material, money-minded sign, and it happens to be in Capricorn. This is the actual sign, that our Pluto is in, which is the 10th house is the house of Capricorn, which is about career status, achievement, upward mobility. So if you think of the U.S., our power, our plutonium, our power, plutonium being just a metaphor, but our power is in our money. It's in our values as well, but it's we're a rich country. At least we have been so far. It's in the sign of it's an earth sign. I've got a symbol here for earth signs. These are both earth signs that we're talking about here, for both the house and the sign itself, which is going to be materialistic. So I find it interesting that we had this emphasis on Pluto right here, and literally the next day, the leader of our country was organizing with other countries. We have Sagittarius on our ascendant, how we present ourselves to the world, talking to world leaders, and we have not put boots on the ground, but we are throwing money, values and money at a major problem in the world. So I saw that as, oh, should have seen that coming. I think there were a lot of people who were afraid that Pluto's return to this spot in the U.S. chart would be dire. But it turned out to be very second house, I think, even though it does cover a wider area. But I just find it interesting that Pluto return next day. We're throwing our valuables.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And this is about, we should do another session to really do a deep dive on the Pluto return, the U.S. chart.
I would love to.
Biden, because
you name the day. I am here.
Oh yeah, me too. I love doing this, because what happens with me is through doing it, I'll get new ideas every time. It's like my intuition will kick in. Oh, I never know. That's interesting. Another thing. And yeah, so I would love to do that. And yeah, you can see these patterns around how this is playing for Biden, how it's playing for the U.S. The fact that it was really hard to know that Putin would do this, even if people now are doing, Monday morning quarterbacking and say, "Oh yeah, this was obviously going to happen." Yeah, but I mean, come on, that's a guess. It happened, and it has world consequences. And then you have to ask yourself, how is it going to shake out? And you're totally right. What did Biden do? He helped the coalition to restore itself, and again, 100% right. Money through weapons, through resources, through also, as the controlling it's like an economic war. They're trying to fight Russia that way rather than putting boots on the ground, right? Which would be potentially more martial or something like that. Yeah.
I cannot thank you enough. I am filled with joy when you come on. I'm serious.
Thank you. No, I enjoyed a lot too. Thank you for inviting me. I love these sessions. So absolutely, if you want to do, for sure that would be great, because
yes, absolutely. We'll set up a time when we get off here or something, sure. Whenever works for you. And again, I'll put the link to Andre's Patreon in the description box, because I have become a patron because I'm watching these weekly astrology videos, learning astrology. The great insight that this man has is fantastic. And I'm so grateful that you have been willing to come on my channel.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for all of this. I know some of it you have to be kind of, steeped in astrology, but hopefully you were able to get something out of this. I got a ton. Hopefully I'll be able to help when I'm talking about these things in my readings. I'll be able to, I remember Andre was saying, So anyway, it is 2:33 here in Chicago. In an hour and a half, I'll be over on Book Art Media to do creative sprints. You're always welcome, everybody. Just bring your creative projects, any kind. And we do 4 25-minute sprints where we just focus on our own creative projects. And then in the 3 minutes between sprints, we just try to encourage each other. That's all there is to it. It's just a good way to be supportive and be creative. So anyway, other than that, I will be right back here tomorrow. You cannot get rid of me, try as you might. And thank you again, Andre. Thank you, everybody. All right. Take care, and I will see you later, or I'll definitely see you tomorrow. Bye.